Hello, and welcome back to Two-Dimensional Design. This is going to be our first lecture this semester, and it is exploring the relationship between art and design. Basically, art and design are everywhere. They shape the products we use, the media we consume, the spaces we move through, and even the way that we communicate identity, emotion, and culture. This lecture introduces art and design not simply as objects we look at, but at ways of thinking, making, and understanding the world. Throughout the course, we'll explore how artists and designers develop ideas, solve visual problems, and use creative processes to communicate meaning. I want you to think back to this as you move through this semester, as you try to develop solutions for the design projects, and to think about how you move through the world. Look around your home environment. Think about where art and design is showing up for you as you go out into the world, whether it's the grocery store or the environment, or to see a show at a gallery or a concert. Think about how art and design is showing up. So, what is the relationship between art and design? Well, they often overlap and are interconnected. Generally, we'll say that fine art is primarily a visual medium that expresses ideas about her human experience in the world. The purpose of design, most typically, is almost always to motivate the audience to do something, to buy a product, to use a service, to visit a location, or to learn certain information. Now, the tools and tactics used to create something like a fine art piece you might see in a gallery or a museum or in a public space are often overlapping and integral to a design process that's used to communicate a message to motivate an audience. So here's a couple of examples of that in action. Two examples that might be more design heavy in the realm of motivating um, uh, something that's for commodification or a more commercial process, and then an image that's more of a fine art piece. So if we look at the piece on the left, you see this really heavily graphically designed poster. There is for sure an artistic and design process. There's a composition that's been paid attention to, but this is clearly advertising a show at a coffee shop. We see that there are workshops that are being offered. Maybe there's live music, there's a schedule, and there's a date. This is a design that is indicating that something is going on and something is being sold to the viewer, the consumer. We're being invited to attend as an audience. We know there's going to be coffee, something's being sold to us. Oh, and something's also being communicated, but it's something that we're participating in. On the right, something is being communicated to us visually. We're not necessarily being sold a product here. This is a self-portrait by artist Ana Mendieta that challenged a lot of notions around femininity, beauty, identity, and place in the world. So here, in this portrait, Ana Mendieta put on facial hair, which normally she doesn't have. She's communicating something about identity, something about sense of place, something about gender, expression, and position in the world. Now, the left image is engaging an audience to participate, to attend, to buy coffee, to take part in this event. It has a date. It tells us the entrance is free. And the right is expressing identity, communicating a message. It is an invitation, but it's an invitation in observation. This is the space where art and design, while both are relying on different compositional properties, different principles and elements of design that we're going to talk about this semester, they differentiate in their purpose. Now, visual art and design is a universal language that expresses ideas, emotions, and identities. It influences perception, storytelling, and brand communication in every medium. If communication is the exchange of ideas, then art and design are visual languages. Instead of sentences and grammar, they use ideas, composition, color, symbols, and materials to communicate meaning. Now, if we look at this image on the left, I want you to think about what this design, which is a fine art design, but it's also communicating meaning through the use of symbols, through the use of imagery, through some of the design principles and elements. We see a lot of repetition, we see a lot of rhythm in this art piece, but I'm wondering what you think this art piece is communicating. Now, art and design overlap in a lot of ways because both are forms of visual communication that rely on creativity, aesthetics, and problem solving. While fine art is often more focused on personal expression, emotion, or exploring ideas, like the two fine art pieces we just looked at, design is usually more focused on function, audience, and usability. Come to this concert at this coffee shop. The entrance is free. Even so, both disciplines use the same foundational visual elements like line, color, shape, composition, scale, and balance to create meaning and engage viewers. The boundaries between art and design are often fluid. Designers regularly draw from artistic movements and techniques to create stronger visual impact, while artists frequently use principles of design to organize and structure their work. With contemporary digital tools, those lines blur even more, creating hybrid creative practices that combine artistic experimentation with design thinking. We can see this overlap across many disciplines. Graphic design can function as both communication and artistic expression. Interior design, for example, combines practical space planning with atmosphere and emotional experience. Product design merges functionality with aesthetics and form. In both art and design, creators use visual language to tell stories, communicate ideas, evoke emotions, and shape how people experience the world. I often say that art is a language. It's just a visual language. Now, to design means to plan and to organize. Design is inherent in the full range of art disciplines, from painting and drawing to sculpture, photography, and time-based media such as film, video, computer graphics, and animation. When we talk about design in this class, we are discussing the act of creative problem solving that is integral to all disciplines in 2 dimensions. This also expands to 3-dimensional art forms and digital art forms as well. So much of creative making that you are doing is centered around finding a solution creatively to a problem. Whether it's an assignment I give you in this class, a way to visually express or communicate something that is important to you, or if you're developing an ad for a company you will work with, you are creatively answering a set of questions. So when faced with creative problem solving, ask yourselves, what is the question I am trying to answer? What is the problem I am finding a solution to? What are the guidelines, components, instructions that I need to follow? What am I trying to communicate? What is the relevance of this piece, this idea, this artwork? Who is my audience? Is there a message to this work? Is it purely aesthetic? What are my goals? And importantly, how do I get there? Now, before we can fully understand art and design, we also need to understand the larger visual culture they exist within. We are constantly surrounded by images, advertisements, films, social media, fashion, architecture, branding, photography, interfaces, and entertainment media, all of which shape how we see ourselves in the world around us. Visual culture examines and how images communicate, how they influence behavior, construct identity, reflect social values, and circulate across society. Art and design do not exist in isolation. They are part of a much larger network of visual references, trends, symbols, and shared cultural meanings. By studying visual culture, we begin to understand not only what images look like, but what they do. Now, if we look at the image on the right, what do we think this is referencing? If you guess that it's a combination of SpongeBob SquarePants and the Starry Night, you were right. So, context is critically important when we're looking to decode and understand an image in its context of visual culture. So we use context to understand an image. Context can include time in history when the image was made, where the image is made, the country, the city, etc., the society, the customs, traditions, and beliefs it was made within, and what images came before it. So I want you to think about this image of Frida Kahlo, a Mexican painter who has been classified as surreal, but in her own statements about her work would not identify as a surreal painter. She said in different ways that she paints her own reality. So this painting is called Diego in My Thoughts. Frida Kahlo had a tumultuous marriage and relationship with Diego Rivera, who was also a Mexican painter of the same era. Here, she's in a traditional garment of her culture with Diego superimposed on her forehead, and branches and vines and roots branching out from around her face in this floral headdress. A ton of symbolism is imbued in Frida Kahlo's work. In this particular piece, we can appreciate this for its aesthetic value, right? For its use of balance, emphasis, and focal point, which we'll talk about this semester, for its use of a visual rhythm that causes the viewer to look around the painting. But there's also a lot of context that's imbued in this piece that's specific to the history and time in which it was made, in the customs and traditions of the culture, and the inner relationship between Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera. So again, we can appreciate it based on its aesthetic nature alone, right? The elements, the principles that go into the design of it that make it an interesting piece to look at. But the context and the symbolism makes it a deeper piece that's communicating meaning visually. It's using design and the elements and principles of design and compositional understanding to communicate a different message visually. So in these next set of images, I just want to show you how visual culture is repetitive. It's in the world around us, and it's highly influential in the art practice and art making. And I want to show how it overlaps with art, with fine art, and the design world. So the top image here is Earth is Garden of Earthly Delights, painted in the 16th century by Hieronymus Bosch. In the bottom right, we see an image painted by Salvador Dali in 1943. It's similar imagery, similar use of design principles and elements. Dali's is very much reminiscent, very much inspired by Hieronymus Bosch. Both are fine art interpretations of a contextual meaning. Similar concept, similar imagery, similar tone. Decades and decades, centuries apart, right? Visual culture, cultural meaning, context is repetitive. Next, we move into the 21st century. We have an art photograph by Eric Craig called The Dali Egg. This Dali egg is clearly inspired by Salvador Dali, who is clearly inspired by Hieronymus Bosch. And then we move into an advertisement, right? So now we're moving from fine art, this repetitive, influential visual culture, into advertising. And a historical context that's repeated, right? That bleeds into aesthetics in a more commercial design use. Similar symbolism, similar imagery, similar context. On the right is the Dali pen from Penorium that uses that same Dali egg, right, which is the same one from Hieronymus Bosch, but this time used to sell a pen. Now, on that pen, you might also recognize imagery here that calls back to Dali, right? That use of elongation. We see this elongation in the 1946 painting, The Temptation of St. Anthony, which shows these elongated legs of these animals that we just saw on the pen. So that elephant that we see in Dali's painting has now inspired a commercial product, a pen by Penorium. So this context shows that visual culture is repetitive, it is overlapping, and it is highly influential. Again, here we see this repeated in a piece called Soul Tracer that calls back to those elongated forms, right? This is a sculpture made out of bronze. It's much more contemporary. And we see it repeated again by artist Jin Kai, replicating the Dali painting, replicating this bronze sculpture, but using Legos. So we're moving right here into a piece that was made in the early 20th century, moving again into almost merging with pop culture. And this kind of transition, this flow, this centuries of influence of visual culture and context brings us to Lady Gaga, right? And this 2010 musical performance for Royal Variety. We can see that Lady Gaga was highly influenced by Dali's legs and brought it into pop culture through the legs of her piano that she used for this performance. Gaga is highly referencing fine art history, in referencing current and past pop culture. The last piece I'll share, and just a bit of a trigger warning, this is going to be Lady Gaga's meat dress. So if you don't want to see that, I would just skip ahead to the next slide. But it's Gaga's infamous meat dress that came into the scene in 2010 and caused just a wild reaction in both the music community, the art community, pop culture community, commodification consumer community. And on the left, it's her in the meat dress in 2010. But what people might not realize is that this wasn't the first time that an artist wore a meat dress. Gaga's piece was actually calling back to and referential of the flesh dress for an albino anorectic from 1987 from the artist Janice Sturback. So we can see here that visual culture is a continuous conversation where ideas, forms, and symbols are repeated and borrowed, transformed, and reimagined. They circulate, they transform, they gain new meaning as they move across art, design, fashion, advertising, film, digital media, and everyday life. Creativity and expression is often built through reference. Like the several examples of references we saw, there is a sense of adaptation and change, right? Taking something taking something old and adapting it into a new current aesthetic, a new time, a new vibe, a new media, remixing it and reinterpreting it. There's going to be several examples of these kind of pop and current contemporary references to previous works this semester, and I encourage you to look out for them.
Nobody tells people
Now,
who are beginners. And I really wish somebody had told this to me. Is that all of us who do creative work, like, you know, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste. But it's like there's a gap.
It helps
that for the first couple of years that you're making stuff,
emerge from nowhere.
What you're making isn't so good.
Every
okay,
artwork
it's not
is
that
shaped
great.
by the
It's
artist's
trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good.
Historical
But your
moment,
taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still
influences,
killer,
and
and your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean?
Not only
A
what
lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit.
but why it
And the
was
thing
made,
I would just
and
like
how
say to you with all my
meaning
heart
is
is that
constructed through it.
most everybody I
At the
know
same time,
who does interesting
understanding
creative work,
context
they went
reminds
through a
us that
phase of
artistic
years
skill and
where
creative
they had really good
practice
taste,
are
they could tell what they were making
evolutionary.
wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They
Artists
knew it felt
develop through
short. It
experimentation,
didn't have this special
repetition,
thing that we wanted it to
influence,
have.
failure,
And the thing I would say to you is
observation, and
everybody
growth
goes through that.
over
And for you to go
time.
through it, if you're going through it right now,
No
if you're just getting out of that
artist begins
phase,
as a master.
you got to know it's totally normal. And
Creative
the most
work is
important
built
possible thing you
layer
could
by
do
layer
is do a lot of
through
work. Do a
process,
huge volume of work.
learning,
Put
and
yourself on a
adaptation.
deadline so that every week
This
or every
next
month you
video
know
that
you're going
I
to
tried
finish
to sneak
one
in there at the
story.
beginning
Because it's only by actually
explores
going
that
through a volume
idea
of work that you're actually
of
going to
artistic
catch up and close that gap.
evolution.
And
How
the
artists
work you're making
develop
will be as
skills
good
and
as your
visual language
ambitions.
over time.
In my case,
rather than
like I
arriving
took
fully
longer
formed.
to figure out
It's by
how to do
Ira
this than
Glass,
anybody
who's
I've
the
ever met.
host of a
It
radio
takes
show
a while. It's going to take
This
you a
American
while. It's
Life.
normal to take a while, and you just
And
have to
it's where he
fight
talks
your
about
way
this
through that.
evolution as an
Okay?
emerging maker, an emerging creator, and what it's like to start out with a lot of
Nobody
ideas,
tells people who are
really good
beginners.
taste and expectation,
And I really wish somebody had
but
told this to me.
not yet
Is that
having the
all of us who
skill,
do creative
right?
work,
You
like,
haven't
you know,
yet
we get
fully
into it, and we
developed
get
that
into it because we
skill
have good
to
taste.
express
But it's like
those
there's a
ideas.
gap. That for the first couple of years that you're
And
making
how
stuff,
you just have to keep trying.
what you're making isn't so good. Okay, it's not
So
that great.
I'm going to play that
It's
for you
trying
now.
to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still killer, and your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean? A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit. And the thing I would just like say to you with all my heart is that most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really good taste, they could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it felt short. It didn't have this special thing that we wanted it to have. And the thing I would say to you is everybody goes through that. And for you to go through it, if you're going through it right now, if you're just getting out of that phase, you got to know it's totally normal. And the most important possible thing you could do is do a lot of work. Do a huge volume of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week or every month you know you're going to finish one story. Because it's only by actually going through a volume of work that you're actually going to catch up and close that gap. And the work you're making will be as good as your ambitions. In my case, like I took longer to figure out how to do this than anybody I've ever met. It takes a while. It's going to take you a while. It's normal to take a while, and you just have to fight your way through that. Okay? Nobody tells people who are beginners, and I really wish somebody had told this to me, is that all of us who do creative work, like, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste. But it's like there's a gap that for the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good. Okay, it's not that great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still killer.
So, to close us out, when we think about creativity, it's easy to imagine artists suddenly having brilliant ideas, but most creative work actually develops through process. And for lots of artists and makers, the process is actually the most important part. More so than the outcome sometimes. Everybody's different here, but the process is so important. Artists and designers constantly move between thinking critically, observing carefully, and experimenting through action. In many ways, creativity is less about having the perfect idea immediately and more about learning through cycles of thinking, looking, and doing. Thinking, looking, and doing form a cyclical approach to creative problem solving. We think by generating ideas, asking questions, and reflecting critically. We look by observing the world, studying materials, images, and visual relationships, and learning from what already exists. We do by experimenting, making, testing, revising, and responding through action. Creativity happens through the interaction of all three, not as a straight line, but as an ongoing process of reflection, observation, and practice. Think critically, look closely, do experimentally. Thank you so much for joining this course. Please stay inspired, keep experimenting, and let your art speak. Let me know if you have any questions along the way. I really do look forward to seeing what you create this semester and learning more about you and your art practice. Have a great day.